And now is time for the affirmative cross-examination of negative Turretinfan. You have 20 minutes to cross-examine Mr. Albrecht. You may begin when you're ready.
Okay, my first question for you is, could you read back, hopefully you have it in front of you, could you read me back what you quoted in the beginning of your speech from Gregory of Nyssa?
Yeah, I can. Can you give me 2 seconds? Yeah, Gregory of Nyssa. Yeah, you want me to go ahead and read it in totality?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Yes.
Again, he who says you shall never worship a strange god forbids us to worship another god. And the strange god is so called in contradistinction to our own God. Who then is our own God? Clearly the true God. And who is a strange god? Surely he who is alienated from the nature of the true God. If therefore our own God is the true God, and if, as the heretics say, the only begotten is not of the nature of the true God, he is a strange god and not our God.
Okay, so in that discussion, he doesn't take a position about images. This is if I understood you correctly, you quoted this as being his interpretation of the verse.
A brief commentary, absolutely. He isn't endorsing the veneration of images. I'm simply pointing out some commentary he gives in his work on the faith, which is specifically regarding the verse in the context.
Okay, and if I understood that there was a bundle of other patristic citations you gave right after that.
Correct.
Origin, Augustine.
Yeah, I think Origin, Augustine, and I was going to quote a couple others, but yeah, and specifically, I just want to be clear to you, I was not quoting them to put forth the positive affirmation of veneration of images and statues, but merely to show that they interpreted this verse in a clear way of it being a prohibition against idolatry.
Okay. And none of the quotations that you gave that I recall mentioned specifically it's okay to venerate images. Is that a correct or incorrect assessment of what you?
Absolutely, that is correct. I believe that there are a good amount of patristic proofs that can be brought forth. If you like, I could bring them forth, but specifically, I was referring to the interpretation of that verse, specifically the verse that you used in your opening statement.
Yes. So, as far as your knowledge goes, I'm not asking you to have an exhaustive knowledge, but as far as your knowledge goes, does Augustine ever say it's okay it's not okay to venerate images of false gods, but it's okay to venerate images of Jesus Christ? Does he say anything like that you know of?
In the sense of using the word venerate, no, I do not know that. I'm aware that he refers several times to pictures in existence of not only of our Lord but of the saints, specifically in churches as well. But
does he say you can?
Excuse me. I'm also aware of the fact that he spoke out strongly against idolatry. No, I am not aware of Augustine or a number of fathers ever saying that we should, venerate them in a certain manner, but he simply points out that these images existed in churches where worship was going on.
Do you think it's proper both to venerate images and to adore them as well?
Well, that would depend what you mean by the term adore. If you mean adore in the sense of giving latria, I would definitely have to say no, because that would be idolatry. In the sense of to venerate and to adore in the sense of loving the creature that God has put before us and giving all glory to God, then I would agree with it. But it would all depend on what you mean by the term adore.
Well, in the Second Council of Nicaea, which you quoted or you cited before,
yes,
it states, "We think the images of the glorious angels and saints ought to be adored. If anyone, however, is not so disposed, but labors and hesitates about the adoration of images worthy of veneration, the holy and venerable synod anathematizes him."
That is correct.
Now, so you would agree with that, even if the word they use there is latria?
I would agree. I do not believe that I know for a fact that the Council of Nicaea is not ordering the worship of images. What I agree with is the fact that anybody that would disagree with the Second Council of Nicaea specifically, I would agree with the fact that they would be incorrect, because Nicaea specifically believes this to be an apostolic tradition.
Nicaea says that they believe it to be an apostolic tradition, but isn't it true that a large synod, only 30 years before, in that same part of the world, had basically said just the opposite, that it isn't an apostolic?
Absolutely, that is true, and I think the unfortunate thing is that synod, I believe it contained maybe 300 or maybe even more individuals. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the unfortunate thing is that they dredged up a lot of arguments using spurious documents, spurious quotations of fathers, and their evidence simply could not date back to apostolic times. I think that the Council of Nicaea, which was the second council, which was fully orthodox, completely dwarfs this other council in the sense of orthodoxy.
What was the second council's evidence from apostolic times?
The second council brought up a number of fathers. It brought up St. John of Damascus, specifically used St. John of Damascus proofs. I want to say from Eusebius of Caesarea, as well as, I'm trying to recall, I don't remember all of the patristic proofs it brought forth, but that was one particular one. I know that the fact that, I remember another fact that was brought up beforehand as well was a comment that Tertullian specifically makes that shows that during his period of time in the world that there were images even on chalices, where the Eucharist was celebrated. So I think that
does he say that the images on chalices were venerated?
No, not at all. My specific point is that the proofs that were brought up, I don't think Tertullian would have said that, because at the time that Tertullian wrote this, he had fallen out of the faith. He was no longer a Catholic. So I don't think Tertullian would have said that. He was against orthodoxy at the time. He was a Montanist.
Were Montanists iconoclasts?
I don't quite recall anybody within Montanism writing a treatise against icons, but specifically, I know that Tertullian was pretty much against anything Orthodox, so I don't think Tertullian was basically blasting the bishop of that church, so I don't think anything, whether he would have agreed with it or not, would have been written in a favorable manner.
So you think that Montanism was such a bad system that it denied everything Orthodox?
I think, no, let me correct myself. I don't think Montanism denied everything Orthodox. I think Tertullian, when he became a Montanist, denied everything on the other side of Orthodoxy. So in other words, he opposed anything. Like, for instance, if there was worship, let's say the worship was going on in a correct manner, he would have opposed it in the opposing church because he did not agree with the bishop. He did not agree with the church. He didn't agree with the priesthood at the time. Tertullian had completely fallen away from the Orthodox faith.
Well, so he would just sort of irrationally lash out as opposed to having a basis for his objections? I
think you bring up a great point there. I think Tertullian a number of times irrationally lashed out and made a number of comments that were not only ahistorical but were anti-Christian, for that matter. I think it's a great question.
But that is your position, that once he became a Montanist, it was like the brain was separated from the mouth and he just spouted off any kind of nonsense? Well,
it isn't like this happened overnight. Tertullian had a period of orthodoxy, then he slowly became, he had a middle period where he was becoming a Montanist. He began to blast a lot of things that were orthodox, and then he became a full-blown Montanist. And I think when he was a full-blown Montanist during this period, I think we need to understand that he was completely opposed to Catholicism in pretty much every regard. But but let me correct myself. Let me just say one thing right away. He is a fantastic evidence, as those that advocate the Second Nicaea point out, for the fact that in churches where worship went on, there were images around there.
Okay, so let's try to let's agree on one thing. Just because there's images in churches doesn't mean anybody's venerating them. Can we agree on that?
Well, it would depend. I would agree that perhaps in some churches there may have been images where veneration did not go on, but we have evidence of a number of churches where there actually are images on walls where people would bow down and pray. So I definitely do think that religious veneration was going on. I think we have positive evidence for that.
Well, you have positive evidence. So what would be an example of positive evidence from any church father talking about people bowing down and venerating images?
Well, I think an even better example would be I can pop it up right now. Are you demanding a patristic source, or could I bring up a document such as, not the Didache, but a document similar to that? Would that suffice?
Well, it better not be from a Montanus source, because after what you just told me about Tertullian.
Right? No. It isn't from a Montanus source, but I don't have it open in front of me, but I want to say that the works or the Acts of John, I'm not sure if you're aware of that, was actually dated to the early 2nd century, the early 100s, and a number of individuals believe that later on it was tainted with heterodox ideas. But indeed, I believe that this has strong evidence of images that were not only existed, but were venerated. We have lamps put in front of them, flowers put around the pictures, and they do receive religious veneration. But within this work, we see that there was a clear distinction between idolatry and religious veneration.
Now, so you're citing to the Gnostic book, the Acts of John?
No, I am not citing to a Gnostic work. I am citing to a work that we have fragmentary evidence of, and of course there are many scholars that believe that heterodox ideas sunk into this at a later period. I would take the opinion of Stephen Bickham, who is an expert on this topic and has studied this the extant manuscripts on this for a good amount of time, who believes that this was actually an Orthodox Christian work at its early period, and later on underwent some sort of corruption at its later period. Of course, it's missing a lot of its work, but nevertheless, this. Excuse me.
Who's that scholar that you mentioned? Does he think that the icon stuff is part of the original or part of the corruptions?
He believes that it is part of the original.
Okay.